And with that being said, obviously, we're going into a weekend, banks are not having the same hours that they usually would. How can we expect businesses to react? Should they be concerned? Should they be protecting themselves against what might happen?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there is protection that they'll have to have on the ground, and then there are certain things that they'll have to put into place, emergency protocols. You know, the big businesses will actually have these protocols in place and will know how to react. But the people that I really feel sorry for are the ordinary shopkeepers, the ordinary small businesses who won't have had these scenarios planned for and won't know how to react. They're the ones that are going to suffer a lot more in terms of over the next weekend and the next few days than certainly the bigger businesses are. And I think that this is going to have not just the knock-on effects on people within Turkey. Let's not forget that we actually now live in a global village, and whatever happens somewhere within a country that is one of the only countries in the world, let's not forget, that doesn't have any national debt, international debt. This is a country that where the economy was thriving, and I think that the next few days, the next weeks, are going to see an impact, a huge impact on the economy and the GDP and the way that people will react internationally towards Turkey. And I think it's a worrying time for them from an economical perspective as well.
All right, thank you very much, Haras, Rafiq. Saruhan, I want to bring you back in here. As he began to mention the current state of Turkey's economy before all this happened, is everything just thrown into uncertainty now?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was uncertain to begin with in the past couple of years. But the latest data that we looked at, and I think we did talk about it in a separate segment a couple of weeks ago, there were some encouraging numbers with real GDP growing, private consumption came very strong. Those are very good things that emerging markets want to see. But then the Istanbul airport bombing took place. And then we're seeing something like this. And let us not forget, even though Turkey is a relatively strong emerging market, at the end of the day, it is an emerging market. So when things like that happen, and Turkish lira is one of the 3 emerging market currencies traded 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. So Turkish lira is immediately impacted as soon as the news came in. And that is going to hit the external debt of the country. The external debt has been growing quite a bit. And about 45 to 47, slightly under 50% of that debt is private corporations. Some of this is, most of it actually is owned in US dollars, right? If the dollar strengthens against Turkish lira, we're going to see more of that, I think, depending on how long the situation is going to continue. But we could see 15, 20, maybe 30% depreciation, devaluation of the currency, which is going to be horrendous news for the economy.
And it's obviously still very early days as everything is still breaking reports of a military coup there in Turkey. I'd like to bring in Patrick Dybell, joining us, sports producer at the state broadcaster TRT World, joining us now by Skype. We've heard a lot of reports, obviously, about attacks on the state broadcaster. What can you tell us about what's happening there?
So what happened, I work for TRT World, which is the international arm of TRT. And when I left work about an hour before all this happened, we had no indication that anything was out of the ordinary or anything was different. But within an hour, we had colleagues telling us that armed soldiers had come into our offices, had shut down our internet, had shut down our broadcasting, which is obviously a big key thing for us, and taken our company phones. And what that did, you know, they completely shut off communication for us. And so we had no idea that any of this was happening an hour beforehand, and then within an hour's time, we were basically pulled off air.
And what's the reaction been with people kind of being cut off and turning to social media, using other sources? What's the reaction been then?
Yeah, a lot of my colleagues went straight home and we're on Twitter, on Facebook, and you know, we're all using VPNs because social media is a little bit suspect in Turkey at times, as you may well know. You know, Twitter was down, Facebook was down for a while, then it was back up, then it was down again, but not very good. Twitter was saying there was evidence of a slowing internet, but the reaction is for me and all my colleagues is to just go home and report from there, and that's essentially what we've been doing on Twitter and on Facebook for the rest of the evening.
Now, we are getting some reports from the Associated Press that the Turkish national spokesman is saying that the coup has in fact been pushed back. Are you hearing anything to that regard? Yeah,
we're hearing something very similar. So basically TRT is based in Istanbul, but in Ankara as well, and that was where a lot of the action actually happened with this, what now looks to be a failed military coup. TRT is now reportedly back in government hands and back broadcasting again. Like us, TRT, the main channel, was taken off air. So we're hearing that this has sort of become a failed military coup as opposed to a successful one.
And how important do you think was that call of President Erdogan to have his supporters take to the streets? We see them blocking tanks, we see them in huge crowds. How significant do you think that was in terms of breaking the coup?
Yeah, in hindsight, it was massively successful. But you know, when I saw it live on air across Turkish media, I sort of looked at it, and to me it was a big gamble, because that really, you know, Erdogan was broadcasting from somewhere that we couldn't clarify. We didn't know where he was. There were reports he was in Germany. There was reports he was in the air. Ironically, coming to you from social media, we didn't quite know where he was coming from. Yet he's asking people to go out into the streets and oppose what was a national curfew that these plotters had imposed on Turkey. So that was to me a massive gamble. But in hindsight, it seems to have worked, because the support that has poured into the streets, especially through streets like, you know, through Taksim Square and Istiklal and at Ataturk Airport, all those sort of areas were swamped with pro-government supporters. And so that seems to have been a tactic that works for Erdogan.
Now, tell us a bit about your time in Turkey, having lived there and worked there. Were there any indications to you about people being unhappy, or any sort of information coming out that would have given any indication that the idea of a coup was even a possibility?
A coup per se, not so much, but Turkey is a very divided society. It's very easy to see the haves from the have-nots. It's very easy to divide them both, and that tends to be where party lines get drawn. We do have to recognise that Erdogan is president, and his party, his former party, the AK Party, was democratically elected, and with a strong majority as well. But that only came after a hung parliament in the first round. So the support for the government is obviously there, as we can see tonight, but not necessarily across the entirety of Turkey is that support as strong as what it is at the moment.
Now, I would like to bring in Tulin, if you're still there. In terms of what you're hearing, the latest reports about the coup being broken, what can you tell us?
Well, you know, I just, really do not want to say anything conclusive, because this is still an unfolding night, and I have no TV, no internet, almost no internet. So, the flow of information through my side is much slower than what you're receiving on the other end of the world. And but what I had, said in the beginning of our, interview is that this has been a standoff, kind of a standoff between the Erdogan camp and the Fethullah Gülen movement, whom were once in a convenient marriage, but then fall out due to the corruption scandal of December 2014. But this came really very ugly, and no one really, predicts that this is going to be a successful coup attempt, because this is not in order of the, chain of command. And so no one is expecting that this is going to be a successful one, but this is definitely going to help President Erdogan's campaign to change the country's constitution and then change the country's governance from parliamentary system into a presidential one. So that's, what has taken place, I guess, tonight. But as we're going through the night, we'll see what kind of a morning we will all wake up tomorrow.
So, given that information, then, would you say that that Erdogan will survive this then? Will he move on? Does he have enough support to move past this? Or will he be forced to really take a look and make some different decisions based on the fact that the coup happened in the first place?
Well, it looks like it, because, this, coup attempt does not have the support of the military change to operate. And so if there is no support, first of all, there is a clash within the military. The military, the ones in charge, all the, commanders of the forces are not in support of this coup attempt. And second of all, the people from the opposition to the, to the ones in support of the government are not in favor of any coup, because you know, the problem of the Turkish democracy is that the opposition is not able to succeed at the ballot box. They are not able to defeat the government at the ballot box. And in the absence of it, the coup is not going to be the answer, and the people, by majority, you know, a definitive majority knows it very well. So this coup doesn't have the support of the public. I think it's safe to say.
All right, Tulin, I'd like to bring in Haras Rafiq back again. One of our other guests talked about the idea of the wealth gap and the divided country. How big of a role does that play going forward?
I think it's a huge role. I think that the country, if you have the two halves of the haves and the have-nots, you're always going to have an element of people that are disenfranchised, that don't actually have the things that they see other people having, and will always be disgruntled and will always be wanting to try and get more. And we know that there are people that turn to violence in order to achieve and get what they actually want to get. I think that will be something that Erdogan will have to tackle a lot more. He'll have to try and bridge the gap between the two if he's going to actually remain successful. But an interesting thing, just as one of my fellow commentators said a little while ago, one of the things, I'm not yet convinced that this actual attempted coup was actually instigated by the Fethullah Gulen movement. I'm not convinced. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I'm not convinced, because even they, from a very early stage, condemned the attempted coup, and I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there at this moment in time, and I think that it'll become a lot more clearer over the next few days. But I think that overwhelmingly what I am hearing and what we are seeing is that overwhelmingly the people of Turkey don't want this coup. And if the people of Turkey don't want this coup, and there isn't the support at the highest level within the military, then it will not be successful. But it doesn't mean that Erdogan is off the hook. It means that he'll have to look at some serious reforms. Yes, he will come, if he survives this, will come through this quite strong with a lot, a lot more support and a lot more sympathy. But at some stage, he will have to tackle the very problems that may have led to this attempted coup being instigated in the first place. This could be the haves and the have-nots. This could be the way the country's moving into a particular direction, or all of the above. And I think that he has some serious things to look at in the morning if he still survives.
Now, you mentioned some of the reforms. What do you think he would really need to look at in order to try and close the gap and try and heal some of these wounds, if at all possible?
I think of course it's possible. I think it's something that, a challenge that he's facing and the leaders before him have faced as well. I think that there needs to be more equal wealth distribution. There needs to be more opportunity for people to actually get on and create wealth for themselves and create jobs, etc. And I think one of the key things that he has to do is to fight and combat this alleged corruption culture that we see not just in Turkey but many other countries as well. But certainly it seems that the whole suspicion and the allegations of corruption, certainly since 2014, have been coming to the fore a lot more, and I think that sometimes even if there is or isn't corruption, I think that if people perceive there to be corruption, then the perception in itself is enough to cause problems. I think that's something he needs to tackle. There needs to be more transparency. And he needs to look at a lot more of the sort of demands and the requirements that ordinary citizens who don't have a lot of the wealth have, and help to meet them.